This is a real lobby with real players, likely brand new ones or guys who are just getting home from work and trying to enjoy an evening casually playing themselves, that I have managed to manipulate Call of Duty's matchmaking system to get into. The average KD, as an estimate for what this lobby looks like, is probably somewhere in between 0.1 and 0.3. The KD of my account is somewhere between 3 and 4. So I have no business being in this Black Ops 6 lobby, but I've been able to achieve it. And today, I wanted to talk about how these lobbies are starting to become more commonplace, and people are starting to manipulate skill-based matchmaking to get into games with brand new players, including a large number of large content creators who are either doing this to farm content or potentially doing this for other opportunities like tournaments. Now, I want to start this video with a disclaimer. This is not a public advertisement on how to break skill-based matchmaking. This is not me giving you a 10-step method on what to do, but rather a conversation that people are cheating the system in ways that other people can't access, and people are doing things that are fairly unethical that are ruining the gameplay experiences of the large majority of casual players, at a frequency that I'm starting to see so much more often that I actually think it's worth talking about. Since the release of Black Ops 6, skill-based matchmaking has been the largest discussion I have seen online between content creators, streamers, and professionals of the game. And it's a conversation that ultimately exists in the top 1% bracket of players, is people who feel battered and bruised by the SBMM system, and that conversation has trickled down to their wider audiences. And chances are, if you're watching this video right now, you probably have some fairly strong opinions on skill-based matchmaking that you can drop in the comments section down below, whilst leaving a like and subscribe, because these deep dive videos take a long time, and you can support this channel and make it go burr. We're on the road to 200k, so it would be very helpful. And Call of Duty have released their own public white papers explaining why skill-based matchmaking exists, and explaining why in their testing they decided to keep it. Now, for those of you who missed that information, this entire PDF document that they released basically explained that when SBMM was on, the vast majority of the wider player base were protected, and many of them stayed online and enjoyed their games and basically stayed on the game. Player retention was high, and they got what they wanted. When SBMM was turned off, player retention basically nosedived, specifically amongst players who were far more casual and have a lower skill set, and they make up the vast majority of the player base. So SBMM on meant that the top 1% of players were leaving more frequently, but did come back because they generally engage with the game to that level. But SBMM off meant that the vast majority of players were actually leaving, and the top 1% were a little bit more appeased. We will touch on skill-based matchmaking and why it exists and why it has to exist later on in this video. And if the video evidence in the background is anything to go off of, you're probably going to understand why this controversial claim I'm making, seemingly against the grain that SBMM is a necessity, might not actually be all that controversial, because some of these guys literally aren't even shooting back at me. The reason this video exists, and the reason I'm discussing matchmaking manipulation today, is because I've started to realize it's becoming more commonplace. I've seen clips on Twitter, I have seen streamers publicly doing it, but without publicly telling their audiences, and I've even seen some streamers, which power to them, doing it publicly and actually publicly disclosing it, like this Australian lad who has a 20 KD, but at least is being honest about the fact that he's manipulating matchmaking. And the reason I'm discussing it now, and haven't necessarily in the past, is because it's becoming so widespread and so commonplace that I genuinely do believe it's starting to affect a large number of casual players. And on top of that, the methods, which I won't detail in full detail, have actually become so accessible that within 4 or 5 clicks, pretty much nearly anybody is capable of doing this, and pretty much nearly anybody is capable of compromising a very large casual player pool. And there are more ethical concerns beyond that. You know, we're talking about people who are farming clips for content, which maybe isn't the worst thing in the world and probably something you can look past, but some of those guys might be getting tournament invites over other players. Some of them might be claiming that they're the best gamer in the world and that they're the best Call of Duty player, and generally getting capital from that, when in reality, they're not that great and they're just manipulating the system. Generally speaking, all of this started to rub me the wrong way, because what people don't realize is that they're ultimately destroying an experience for the vast majority of the player base, and I just think generally not being honest about it and claiming to be the best or post all of these clips of you being the best is pretty insane. Like, I think that's wild without even publicly disclosing how you're doing it. To cut a long story short, the whole situation is just starting to rub me up the wrong way, and I would rather audiences are more actively aware of this so that they can combat some of the nonsense that they're seeing online, as opposed to not being aware of it. Now granted, this isn't a free pass for you to look at any good COD clip that exists on the internet and say that somebody is cheating or manipulating the game. And I will explain that there are some general variances here that does mean that this stuff is still doable without manipulating anything. But much like the new age era of artificial intelligence creating images that your nan on Facebook will like, there have been a number of nukes dropped in Black Ops 6 recently that are entirely fraudulent and just should never have happened. So much so that CDL pros were confused as to how people were getting nukes when they were fighting for their damn lives with a 1.2 KD. So let's talk about the method. Now, some of you are going to be aware of this system, and it's called two-boxing. And generally, the basic principle is that you take an account that's extremely high level that you want to use for cameras, whatever you want to do with it. Maybe you just want easy lobbies, whatever the situation so happens to be. And you join an extremely new low level account in order to get easier lobbies, generally dragging the SBMM average down. Now, Call of Duty actually has mitigations to this, and if you join somebody whilst they're searching for a match, it will actually cancel the search and research again in order to get optimum SBMM of a lobby that it thinks makes sense for this wider range of KDs. So if you happen to join during the search process, it will make sure that it readjusts its average to get you the correct lobby that it feels you should be in for the general mix of skill brackets that exist in your lobby. Which is why many of you who have played solo probably find the solo experience to be more sweaty than playing with teammates. I've actually often invited my viewers to join me in my party, and that has exponentially changed the average of the lobby, and I'm very publicly transparent about that. Not only is it a great way for me to play with guys who support my channel, but yeah, it does generally make it a bit more of a mixed bag experience. However, the situation has changed so that if you join an account after it's completed the matchmaking search in progress and is actually in a physical lobby that's populating, you can join a lobby like the ones you're seeing in the background that you definitely shouldn't be in. Historically, you would technically need a second PC or a second console, or you would need lots of money and spend lots of money on lots of different copies of the game. So the barrier to entry for how people have been doing this has been a cost issue. Now, I'm not going to reveal how, and I'm not going to talk about the full ins and outs of it, because I don't want to be seen as publicizing something that I feel is compromising to the wider player base, which I think is genuinely an issue. But for a handful of clicks and for a very little amount of cash now, this is something that nearly anybody can do. And in fact, it's become so commonplace and so common that in the 4 or 5 tests I did to do this video and record this footage, because I do not want to be compromising people's lobbies and I don't want to be destroying basically games I have no business being in, I actually ran into other people doing it. I saw people with diamond camos and dark matter and people with extremely high prestige accounts existing in lobbies that they shouldn't have been in. It's becoming so frequent that you can actually identify people manipulating matchmaking that shouldn't be in a lobby just by the sheer level of their character alone and the camos that they have unlocked. Granted, you will get the odd player who is of a high prestige and has a couple of camos who's actually got a very, very low KD, but that's very rare. In my experience, most of these lobbies are players who are level 0 to 45, most of them are players who will barely shoot back at you, most of them are players just going about their business after a long day of work. But every once in a while, you will spot somebody running around who's very clearly manipulating the system to be in a lobby that they otherwise shouldn't be in. I think the footage in the background speaks for itself, and I should clarify, this wasn't even me trying particularly hard. I'm very confident if I full forehead moded this and used the most maximum perks and weapons and things available to me, I probably could have dropped lots of easy nukes that I could have farmed for impressions on Twitter, or could have farmed for easy likes on Instagram or TikTok. Hell, as a streamer and content creator, it would have been entirely easy to record videos or even live stream this process without actually showing you how I was doing it. And if you're still watching the video at this point, it's clear that SBMM exists for a reason. Now, I do want to clarify, the average KD of a player in Call of Duty Warzone is 0.86, which means that if you are 0.86 and above, you are above average. If you are 0.86 and below, you are just ever so slightly below average. But in itself, a negative KD is extremely standard in Call of Duty Warzone, and that number changes a little based on multiplayer. If you're above a 2 KD in Warzone, you're in the top 1% of all players, and Warzone has millions of players. And if you're above 3.5, you are in the 0.1% bracket. 0.1% of millions of players. And the reason I'm talking about this is because it's the illusion of the 1%. Content creators and streamers, myself included, have spoken about SBMM at length, and we've created a conversation online where SBMM is being viewed as something that's heavily frowned upon. Ultimately, because most of us are top 1% or top 0.1% players. And that conversation has bled down to players who are of substantially lower skills and KDs. And because you guys are experiencing skill-based matchmaking and you are playing players who are of your caliber, you think the same as what we think. When in reality, what's actually occurring here is a trickle-down conversation where the top 1% of players have convinced players that they themselves want to basically manipulate and be against, that SBMM is an issue. And it isn't. It exists for a reason. Look at these lobbies. These guys are people who have never spoken about COD Online, don't have Twitter, don't have Reddit, don't engage in these conversations, probably just got home from a night shift or school and are just looking to play the game. And they make up the vast majority of the player base. And because we've propagated this conversation online as content creators and streamers at a higher level, it means that it's trickling down to audiences across all levels. And even if you're a 0.8 KD, a 0.9 KD, a 1 KD, a 1.1 KD, all of you are experiencing SBMM, and you are being placed into lobbies that Call of Duty thinks is effective for you. But that's because you guys don't have a visual understanding of what substantially worse or what substantially better looks like. If you are a 1 KD player, a 1 KD lobby is going to look like hell on earth for you. But in reality, 3, 4, 5 KD lobbies do exist that may make your version of hell look like a nice little walk through the park. And if you're a 0.8 KD player, the same principle applies. But because you guys don't know that these lobbies exist where players don't shoot back, don't leave crouching, some of them don't use any movement at all. In fact, there are a couple of players in this who do genuinely just crouch around the map crab walking the entire time. You're entirely unaware of the fact that SBMM is existing because these players shouldn't be facing you. And they shouldn't. So we have this top-down conversation where players who are the most burnt out by SBMM, and also the players who generally have the largest following because they are content creators, are basically saying that SBMM shouldn't be a thing and expanding a conversation to a vocal majority when in reality SBMM is protecting a very unvocal majority. This is not me saying SBMM is perfect, by the way. Absolutely no way, shape or form. Now, I will admit, credit where credit's due, Call of Duty is genuinely adjusting matchmaking based on the caliber of the number of players you matchmake with when you go into a lobby. I've actually been able to play Black Ops 6 this year with friends of substantially lower skill standards because they are trying to create a fair average, and I've seen this play out in real time. But there are more wider issues, like how strong should SBMM be in a casual playlist versus a ranked playlist? And also, how much variance should there be? I find in my experience that SBMM does not bend or break, even if I'm having particularly bad sets of games. By design for me, it's an imperfect system, but almost a necessary evil, because as this gameplay is illustrated in the background, there are players who simply just shouldn't be in the same bracket as someone like me, and should never ever have to run into me. And the reason this video exists is just to make you guys aware of this. There is a whole mystery around how do streamers do this? Do content creators do this? How are people manipulating lobbies? Is SBMM manipulatable? And the answer is yes, and it's happening at a pretty wide-spaced scale, at least in the content creation scene from what I've seen, and I want to talk about it publicly and transparently because somebody needs to. But before I wrap this video up, I do want to say, this is not a universal red card for you to walk around to every clip online, every good gameplay, and run around saying to people, hey bro, nice 2-box, nice SBMM manipulator, nice cheats bro. SBMM as a system has natural variance based on player population. I stream, for example, from 9 AM to 1 PM, and granted, SBMM generally is quite weaker during that time because it has a more limited player pool to operate with. Most of you guys will play from 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening onwards, which is when it's at its absolute peak because it has the largest player pool to operate from. So there is natural variance, and I come from somebody as a streamer who has a background of never really manipulating matchmaking beyond going to North America when there's a lot of cheaters in Europe. And even I've had numerous accusations of two-boxing, VPNing, basically people just laying claims about technicalities that they don't really understand in terms of how COD's matchmaking system works. And that's with what I'd call very average to average plus gameplay, some pretty exceptional gameplay in places. But generally speaking, a broken clock is right twice a day, and SBMM is a system that will adapt, ebb and flow on various circumstances for certain reasons. So you shouldn't be running around telling people that their clips are absolutely horrendous because they've manipulated gameplay. But what I will say is this. There are a section of creators and a section of gameplay players who post these clips online who have these lobbies permanently, from start to finish, from the first video they've made to the videos they're making now, and from the clips that they're farming online. And that is a conscious decision that they are consciously making, and if they haven't been honest about it, then they are ultimately doing it at the detriment of the wider player base. And I won't defend them for doing that, and I don't think most people will. And in fact, if some of the clips that I've seen online are anything to go by, the comment sections are getting a little bit feisty with it. Now, there is a wider conversation to be had here. Should SBMM exist to this capacity? Is it ruining the idea that there are good players out there when CDL pros are getting 1.2 KDs because they're facing some of the world's best? And have we stripped away the ability for players to be uniquely quite talented at these games? Because if they are talented, in the eyes of an SBMM-based system, maybe they're doing something sketchy. Those are definitely wider conversations. They're conversations that affect me as a streamer and content creator myself who gets numerous cheating accusations on a daily basis. But I think the reality is clear. There is a very easily manipulatable matchmaking system that exists in Call of Duty right now. It is happening more than people think it is. It is easier to do more than people think it is. And because of those two variables, that's why I've brought this video to you today. So folks, if you found this video interesting, if you found it enjoyable, drop a like, send it to a friend, post it on Reddit, I don't bloody care. Help me get this channel to 200k this year. I'd really appreciate it. Check out some of my other videos as well on Call of Duty's pay-to-win audio or also their service system. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you again in the next one.